Chapter 12. Naturally, Yu Qianqiu did not know what his master was thinking. He was trying his best to compete with the golden bead. After an unknown period of time, the golden bead, which had been spinning faster and faster, finally slowed down. It was now spinning at a uniform speed. Yu Qianqiu was overjoyed. He thought to himself that this guy was finally full. The true qi that was converted from spiritual energy immediately flowed into his dantian. Cry. When the dantian was 2/3 of its original size, it could no longer be blown up. Yu Qianqiu had already cursed 18 generations of White Fox's ancestors. Wouldn't giving him this thing be harmful? With the current situation, he was afraid that he would not even be able to reach the foundation building stage. His dream of flying on a sword would be cut off. Just as he was feeling annoyed, the golden bead that was spinning at a constant speed suddenly gave off a dazzling light. His dantian suddenly became hot. Yu Qianqiu could not bear the heat. The true qi that could not be squeezed in for a long time suddenly entered. The fixed dantian bulged again. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. The opportunity had come. He did not care so much. Enduring the heat, he raised the mysterious heaven skill to the limit and poured true qi continuously. After an unknown amount of time, when the dantian was 5 or 6 times bigger, the golden bead's light dimmed. It was as if it had woken up and was actually moving according to a fixed path. He could not pour true qi anymore. However, Yu Qianqiu was satisfied. According to the size of his dantian, it should not be a problem to cultivate to the tribulation stage, right? Thinking of this, he was secretly pleased. Now that his dantian was successful, he had entered the first level of qi training. He decided to use the mysterious heaven skill as a reference to the first level of qi training. As expected, the true qi flowed smoothly in the meridians. After a few cycles, Yu Qianqiu was greatly refreshed. He was overjoyed. Thinking of the second-level qi training route in his mind, he gritted his teeth and adjusted his true qi, rushing towards the unfamiliar meridians. The strong true qi rushed all the way with an unstoppable momentum. The pain from the widening of the meridians was unavoidable. Yu Qianqiu was both in pain and happiness. He gritted his teeth and forced the second-level route to open. His body shook and the true qi circulated a few times. The painful meridians instantly became warm and he felt like he was floating. Comfortable. True qi advance, the destination. If the doubts about what happened to Yu Qianqiu were cleared up, these children without a root bone at the foot of the mountain could openly charge forward again. To cultivate. While he was the unstoppable qi flow that everyone longed for, breaking through all obstacles and circulating was heading to the White Fox, looked at the spatial radius of nearly 1,000 discovery made for she didn't want to come out before. Although she had heard about it, large thoughts were everywhere. She could not help but come out. She was still strong, but the resistance was tenacious. She didn't expect that he was halfway through. He had to adjust his reality, but not long after the Japanese unknown storage pouch. She also changed the line of the matter of the Dalian. The revelation she collected all the flags together. I'm afraid there's such not long after, and even raised more small challenging. I don't believe in me. There was also a division between one by which the lightning started to fall. If it was not chaos, he said in a low voice, the White Fox silent shouted. The White Fox bent to his side. The four wanted to get her to chill out the slender fingers to put it under her nose. But as long as it was a big body, she sniffed the fragrance and smelled for his thought was not able to fade away. She listened to the decision she could not feel revealed all around. The White Fox was less strong. She looked around her world. After enjoying it, that it was almost obvious that the master looking at her top thought that the White Fox stopped and stared at heaven's skill. He decided to wrap them saw you. She had already mastered and busying himself around 4 yards and still say the white fox had come out. She walked over with light steps, standing outside and slowly returned into his heart. What are you doing? Suddenly, lost all senses, standing with his chain so that the big. But now there was even around reached the 5th level. I think she turned around and this is that makes he smiled and said that they should know that's why he said master specifically gave us a statue in front of the bed with a shade sides. So as long as our race is sure that something has happened to him, we won't have to worry about this fact. Just without considering this person could be considered as his master. She nodded. Then from that day jumped out of the he looked as if he had said to sure she will be our something that is diameter. Although he was after a long time, still found Marshall brother how decipher. Yu Qian, however, actually started dancing with joy, seeing that he as if scared me. It is really that it was because of suddenly this matter was overside, and so I will have to show Marshall brother. How she thought you were no shot, he would not must clear this matter. This is gone. It was like a nice message from the place restrained and said there was almost behind it. Don't you just want to know why a black shadow fall? The white shadow Marshall stretched out her sword and held up his passionate pillar, patted his chest, Marshall by the shut mouth and monk. We will leave it slowly placed it on the one when the others heard it was about to pulled out to understand how important Yu Qian white person laughed with a ray quickly said, I guarded the stone pillar. I will not disappoint the second that fell other second junior Marshall brother. If he did not survive the way something that would make you handsome, yeah, choke out as well. Naturally scratched his head. Trying to fool. He stared at him and said, yesterday, how sad saw Shirji and Jun after speaking to Qian laughed. This brat really should be because of the golden pearl. The white I didn't think that Shirji had already reached the 5th level or not. Yu Qian decided not to receive orders from the sect leader to grant you head. I don't know what happened either. Is there some sister for your kindness? You didn't ask anymore. There really is a secret. It's better for me. Master silent shoulder and to do it myself. You can be considered to have entered level 1. Yu had a very silly and naive look on his face. You should work hard to cultivate. Am I asking you? When you level 4 to show his filial piety, finally couldn't help however, with his cultivation level, he would not be able to scratch his head in embarrassment, and I remember he was too secret. He was afraid there's something I want to ask you. Came to please help with his current speed. He did not know Sansi nodded his head to dig the stone pillar. He said happily, what secret is it? The white fox quickly emerged from his palm. Gradually she reformed shook his head at her waist and took out a pair of black all his chi. Master said, me not to tell outsiders. And a petal slowly opened. The latter suddenly had after it unfolded. The flower buds waved again. What are you doing? He thought to himself. The junior brother said how really level 2 my fox clan likes to live in caves. How Sansi's no family. This is a magic treasure. And his disciple actually he wants to bring level 2 chi training. It's called the mountain piercing. While he was still in shock, when you wear it, he piqued his interest even more. How Sansi's eyes widened. He took a deep breath. Even the heart calmly with a smile. Outsiders are people other advantage to wearing it. Yu Qian was already sweating your amount of spiritual energy. It was obvious that he had used his chi. That's why my clan's ancestors his face was slightly pale as he spiritual energy to dig holes to live in. Does this count as me reaching you can use it after you put it on and inject your vital energy into it? Yu Qian the shock on how Sansi's face disappeared and was replaced with a solemn expression. Really? When his disciple kept his chi, the former nodded heavily threw the sword away, and the latter don't know what happened to your body. Then said his 10 fingers were covered with 10 black shiny you mustn't tell anyone about your dantian. He waved his hands a few times. Remember, and it looked very powerful. Tell anyone. Wu Baoru could not help but sigh. He felt that his dantian had taken cultivation as a disciple. You won't be able to hide it. Following the white fox, if anyone asks, you won't tell anyone. You can say that not long after Yu Qian still looked worried. You already started promoting his dantian as if the gloves had become one with another master. Who told you to keep his vital energy? I'll bear with you. I'll say that you reached level 4 chi training. He slowly raised his hand and said, "Let me try. I swear that I won't tell anyone about the secret that Marshall nephew told me today. You must remember Master's words no matter what. I'll die a horrible death." The fingers sank into the base of the finger without any effort. Right? How Sansi tried a few more times and it was the same. Already had the mentality of treating his head and wait for that someone would eavesdrop. Thank you. Then
Hearing
his
his
lowered
master's
voice
giving me
and
this
said,
treasure.
"You Chin-cho was happy
The
at
white
first."
fox shook her
Don't let
head.
anyone
He
else
had
didn't
really
say I was
reached
giving
level
it to you.
4
Wu-Bao's
training.
eyes lit up.
This is the
And
heritage
he immediately
treasure of
made
my
his
fox
zero
clan.
His master had
You
said
should have the right to
seriously.
give it to
I
you.
do have
I'm
a
thinking
secret
about
when
how
I'm
long
cultivating
I've just
in the
lending it
blue
to you
light
for a
set.
while.
Master
He
always
really
gives me
hadn't
his
heard of
spirit
anyone being
stone
able
to
to cultivate
cultivate
Chin-cho's
joy
level
level
of
of
refining chi in a month.
Master
He
doesn't allow
smiled.
me to tell
It
you.
was said
Understand.
that there was someone with extremely
Wu-Bao
high
had buried
power
his
who
head
had
in
reached the
work.
4th level of
Seeing
refining
that
chi
there was
in
no
a
more
dance and
sound,
stone
he
chips
turned
flew
to look at him
impossible
and
to reach
asked,
level
"Anything
4
else?"
in less than half a day.
month.
He
successfully
shook
made
his
his
head and
coffee
said
with
that
nothing
nothing
pearl
in
in
his body. He
What?
took off
He
his
believed
gloves
that
and
there
hung
were
them
many
on his
people in
waist.
this world who had
He
evil
found
found
a
out
place that he thought was a
why.
good place for feng
His
shui.
master
His
was
words
this.
made sense.
He struck with his
It was
palms
normal
a few
for him
hundred
not
times
to give
and
seriously
seriously
to your disciple understands
master's
After that, and the
meaning.
purpose
The
was
stone
nothing
coffin
more than
that
for
had
the
been hollowed
disciple's
out and
cultivation
could be
to
moved with
increase
his paw.
cultivation was placed into the
That
pit.
suddenly
Strange.
felt like
I
he was
can't
fooled.
see
He
through your
carefully
cultivation.
placed his
He grabbed
master's
Chin-cho's
body and
shirt
said,
and Sansi looked at his disciple
"Are you
and
covering
told
it
me
with
the
a
stone
knife?"
lid. The surrounding
suddenly
soil
shook
was
his
used
head
to
and
make a
said,
bun.
"You Chin-cho
Forget
it.
it. Snorted
Don't
his
worry.
master was naturally the
I
filling
don't want
look
to
on
know."
his face instantly
He looked
disappeared.
left and right
shrugged
and
his shoulders
circled
and
around his
smiled
eyes
bitterly.
and said indifferently,
Master, he
"What?
kept
Even if you
feeling
ask
that
me,
something
you
was
want
to
to
fight
know."
now that you can't trick him.
Finally,
I only know that
he
it has
slapped
something
his
to do with
forehead.
the forbidden
Wu-Bao
area
was
in the
startled
background
to be a
before he
tombstone.
started laughing
He said
maniacally.
he then
put on
guilty
his gloves
conscience,
and made
but
another
he had treated the other
tombstone.
party as an
He
idiot.
on top, he had always been treated as
he
an
wrote
idiot by the
grave
other
of my
master. Because of his past
he had
life.
lost so
And
much
after
faith.
listening
On
to his
the
master's
side, he wrote,
words,
he said he
decided to keep
what
the
a
master
master
the golden
character
pearl to himself. You actually dared.
After
It
he was
wasn't that he
done,
was afraid
he
of
took a
what his
closer
master
look.
would do.
You must be tired
But
of
some
other
than the
were
writing
always
being
like
a
this.
little
He
ugly,
suddenly
there was
released his
something
aura.
any
Couldn't
other
be
mistake
fixed.
even to the
How could
people
the current
closest to
Yu
him.
Chin-cho
Carried the
withstand a
tombstone.
nascent
It wasn't that he didn't
cultivator's
believe
aura,
dumbfounded,
but it was for the
he
good
was
of everyone.
immediately
Walked around the grave
by
a
the
few
forbidden
times,
area
and the killing
background
was
was his
clear.
forehead was sweating.
How Sansi
Yu
muttered to
Chin-cho
himself
turned out that
boldly,
because he
"If you
wanted to
dare
make
to
his
touch a
master's
single
grave
hair
per
of
the
mine,
back mountain,
the
I
whole
guarantee
grave mound
that you
was
will
perhaps
never know
a
really
real
had
secret."
something to do with that.
Now
If
he
you
had
don't
forgotten
believe
which
me, then
direction
shook
his
his
master's
head and
head
stopped
and
thinking
feet were
about it.
buried
You think I
in.
don't dare?
A few
He
days
couldn't
later,
just randomly
Yu
take a
Chin-cho
direction
was
to
meditating
on the tombstone how
I'll
Sansi
wait
came
and
in
see.
and threw a
Damn
pile
you.
of things on the couch.
Chin-cho raised his eyebrows and smiled.
stopped his
But there is something I have to
remind you. He
The
wiped
latter
the sweat
smiled
off his
and
forehead
said,
and
"I don't
prepared
know
to
enough
dig up the
for
grave
myself
again
to
to
see
see
how
how
his
his master
master
buried
buried
the
the
stones here for you
The
to
white
cultivate
fox,
and
who
absorb.
had been
watching him from the side,
I copied that book for
carrying
you.
a tombstone and
There are
reaction
all
around
the
the
cultivation
grave.
methods for the
It
aura
did not know
refinement
what he was
stage
trying to
inside.
do. The former laughed
There's
and
also
said,
that sword.
I will give you
Was
all
this a
custom
custom
of some place. When you cultivate,
If you don't
her
tell me,
beautiful
find
eyes
out
fill
why
you
you
immediately
looked
looked
at
at
him
him
curiously.
curiously. Thank you.
Although
It
your
wasn't until
cultivation
this guy
guy
was
was
about to
giving
dig up the
chance.
grave
The
that
sect
white
hasn't
fox
given
kill me
yet.
now. It turned
It's
out
not
that
Chin-cho's
Chin-cho's
mother
mother
had
had
actually
actually
forgotten
how
how
keep
master
the
was
matter of your
buried.
cultivation a secret for as long as you already locked on the golden pearl. Chin-cho flipped through the book and asked. He did not know whether to laugh. The other party was going to make a move. He could afford to smiled and said, but the people
The
watching
muscles
from
on
the side
Wu-Bao's
felt your
face
cultivation
twitched.
speed is godly.
The white
He rolled his
fox
triangular
looked
eyes
down
and
and
suddenly
negotiated
pushed
Yu
Chin-cho
talent
away.
assembly.
With a
Sect
kick,
leaders
he still
easily
landed on the
said,
side of the grave
"I
mound
fell
and
into your
I'll go
trap.
with a few shixiao.
You're
Yu
trying to
Chin-cho
provoke
at that
Saul's
time,
downfall.
when we
The
distribute
latter
the
pulled
foundation
in this
buildings
place
that were
hills.
wrinkled, other than him
I'll have
and
the
the white
nerve to
fox,
ask
he shook
for
his
one
head
head
no
to
doubt
prepare
that
for
the
your
stone be
foundation
astroed
by
by
the
the
start.
daughter. And
You're
he squatted
obviously
beside
afraid
the
that
grave
killing
and
Wu
looked
Bao
aroused
the
the
fox.
suspicion of the
He
other
bit
old
his lips
guy.
and
Seeing
didn't
her
say
glaring
anything.
still want to find a
He
way
finally
out. His eyes
realized
were
that
a
the
little
white
red.
fox
He knew
was
this would
reminding
happen.
him
How
where the
could he not
tombstone
know
should
your
be
best
buried.
drunkard of a master was used
So
to
he
being
pointed
lazy?
at the
location of
Look
the
at what
stone
you've
now
done,
that he
shouted
took the
Clara.
initiative
You
to
mean to
ask to
bury
do he didn't
something.
leave any
It was
face
for
for
his
the white
words.
fox nodded. The next day,
Since he had
his
already
master
fallen
Chin-cho
out with him,
carried the
there was
tombstone
no
to
need
look
to
to
hide
picked
it.
a time
He
when
looked
there was
around
no
and
one
seemed to
around.
feel feel that it wasn't the right
Charlie
place.
carried
Little
a bag of things.
He could not help but shout to her
forbidden
area. Sister White,
I will destroy
your
your
dainty
breath
now and torture you for the rest of your life.
who had
until
always
you
been
tell me.
elegant.
Chapter
Could
13.
not help but roll her
so
eyes.
angry
Sister
that he was
White
trembling. She
On the
decided
other
he had
side
been
of
on
him,
let
let
him
him
do
do
whatever
whatever
he
he
wanted.
shouted.
And no one had
She
ever
turned
seen
around
him
and
like this
walked away.
before. He
The
just
white
vaguely
fox
heard
stood
the
up
word
and said
idiot
softly,
coming out of her
brother
mouth.
joking.
You
You
hadn't
hadn't
really
thought
thought
that
that
she
she
would
would
not
not lie to him. So he buried the tombstone in that location.
I had the golden pearl
and
so I'm not
after
he
he still felt that
What
something
would
was
they
missing.
Today
Today
seems to be
his
the day
eyes
he
lit
got
up
out
and
and
ran to the
smiled.
flowers.
I'm
and
afraid
planted
I'll
them
play
to
you to
annoy
death.
this time.
Old
The white
dog.
fox,
I'm
who was
going to
not
stay
far
with
away,
Chincho
was
from
attracted
this.
by her
But he
brother's
sighed
actions.
and
The white
said,
fox frowned
"Stop."
and
Her
asked,
face
"I'm afraid I'm a
became
little ugly as she looked at
If
him.
you want me to
left the
tell you,
mountain for
there
a
were
month,
not
I'll go to
many
green
wildflowers
before
to
he
be
left.
left.
Master
He told me to find
After
a
he
secluded
picked them
place
here
to
and
agree.
there, it
I'll
became a
explode
mess.
my dainty
Chincho said
The
as he
nearby
sat
flowers
were
were
ruined
ruined
by him. The white fox nodded.
They were gathered you immediately after you
She continued to play the zither and sing. He readily agreed. The former smiled. As for what he was planning, Yu Qianzhou could even guess it with his butt. He took out the mysterious heaven's shell from his bag and studied that he would avenge his master, who followed behind. After a few days of tranquil smile, he felt that the spiritual aura in the air. The two raised his head towards Huangsong Hall. He turned around and saw the white fox standing passing through them in his hands. They could see many disciples sitting in the middle of the square and found that there was no place to slowly absorbed the dense spiritual aura. Let the white fox live when the spiritual everyday like hands became dull. A knowing smile appeared on Qianzhou's body immediately became more vigorous. When they were about to reach the middle of the Qianzhou opened his eyes and looked at the stones. Now that there was no one playing or singing, no wonder the cultivator it was particularly quiet. He thought to himself, they were really right all over the stone wall. A high-grade stone that someone exchanged 100 middle grade stone at night, and a middle grade stone could steal my spirit. He directly tied it and sent it to the golden pearl. The master gave him more than 10 middle grade stones at once, save me, which were worth more than 1,000 low grade stones. Yu Qianzhou shouted with all his might. The white fox was still playing the zither. The entire square could hear his voice, and it was incomparably miserable. Yu Qianzhou listened to it for a few days. At first, in an instant, he felt that it was enjoyable, in the square, but now he felt that his ears were going to grow calluses. Wu Baoru did not expect this guy to do this in public. Sister White, he almost fainted from anger. Singing the same song over and over again. Stop. He threw the stone in his hand into the pool and he called out to the white fox. F***CK. The white fox dog and raised her peerless face. Just as Yu Qianzhou was about to hide in the golden pearl, a voice came from inside the hall. Stop. After saying that, at the same time, he glanced at the elder who was giving lectures quickly flashed and blocked in front of Yu Qianzhou. But he didn't think much of it. The white figure at the entrance of the cave was the Chu Pinger whom Yu Qianzhou had peeped on the body the other day. Wu Baoru flew into a rage. As soon as she entered the cave, the elder who was called Senior Brother Lu frowned and shouted, when she saw who Junior Brother Wu, she was shocked. Why don't you look at where you are? She did not expect that the pervert was actually talking to that beautiful woman. This person's name was Lu Wanwan. He hurriedly hid to the side. After being reminded by considering if he should ask White Fox looked around and saw countless eyes looking at him in disbelief. With his cultivation, he did not notice anyone. Then he thought of the little bastard's cry, and his heart sank. He smiled awkwardly and said, he had lost a lot of face today. Why don't you change the song? But the hateful face behind Senior Brother was singing the same song. He was so angry that his whole body slightly and said, in my early years, I also collected the famous songs of the world, making a racket outside the hall. None of them could enter my heart. Sect Master Lu Chongqing ever since I listened to the songs you taught me, I feel that no other song immediately turned around and shouted, why should I change? Sect Master Chu Pinger, Marshal hiding at the entrance of the cave, trembled and muttered, save me. That song was actually written by that pervert. Marshal Uncle Wu wants to kill me. How is that possible? Lu Chongqing and the others immediately stared at Wu Baoru. How about this? They knew very well why Wu Baoru went to look for another song for Sister White, and I will ask Sister White to accompany it with the sound of the zither. Little bastard, I'm going to kill you. Yu Qianzhou was so angry that he almost vomited blood. White Fox's eyes slightly brightened. He leaped over Lu Wanwan she nodded and shot a ray of light. Brother Cho is very talented. Nonsense. Sister White has already experienced it. Lu Chongqing flung out the horsetail waist in his hand. If you can compose another song, the Sister White will be more than happy. And wrapped around the ray of light. Yu Qianzhou nodded and walked back and forth on the bridge with his hands behind his back. Two elders flew out from his side. He lowered his head and pondered what song he should choose. The latter stared at Yu Qianzhou. It would be best if the white fox could accept it and also make her like it. He looked like he wanted to tear Yu Qianzhou into pieces. Otherwise, it would be a pity for a late-stage tribulation passing expert to hide here. What's going on? He was really made to be a golden bodyguard. The white fox's eyes were filled with anticipation as he walked back and forth and cried loudly. Today, Marshal Uncle Wu found me and forced me to tell a secret. Was also full of curiosity. He also took away the 100 mid-grade spirit stones. She did not know what kind of peerless song this ugly pervert could compose. Originally, I was going to swallow my anger and let it go. Yu Qianzhou but for some reason, clapped his hands Marshal Uncle Wu refused to let me go. He smiled and said, I think Marshal Uncle Wu the name of the song shall be A Dream of Mandarin Ducks and Butterflies. I didn't expect that right after my master died. Marshal White will be able to enjoy it again. White Fox said softly. Sect Master, please help me. Chu Pinger, who was at the entrance of the cave, the entire square immediately boiled ducks and butterflies. Although the cultivation world was fickle in relationships, it was rare for a Marshal Uncle to immediately snatch away his junior brother's disciples' belongings. He gathered his emotions as his junior brother died. His voice was slightly hoarse as he sang. Yesterday was like the flowing water in the east, far away from me and cannot stay. Although
Today
no
my
one
heart
dared to
is in
talk
chaos
loudly,
and worries
whispers
me.
were unavoidable.
Draw a knife to cut
Everyone
the water
looked
and
at
it flows
Wu-Baoru
even
as
more.
if they were looking at a monster.
Drink a cup to drown your
There were
worries
also
even
disciples from Wu-Baoru's
more. The
faction
cool
who
breeze
lowered
of the
their
Ming
heads in
dynasty
shame.
drifts everywhere.
Many female
Only the
disciples
new
heard
laugh,
about
who
Yuqiancho's
hears the
pitiful
old
experience
cry.
and saw how
The
pitiful
word
he was.
love is so hard.
Most of them had tears in
Should
their
I
eyes.
ask clearly or should I pretend
Among
not
them,
to know?
Chu Ping bit her
It's
lower
hard to be
lip.
content with knowing more
She
and
didn't
knowing
expect
less.
that the talent who composed
It
two
seems to
peerless
be an
songs
era
would
of
be
mandarin
abused
ducks
like
and
this.
butterflies. But who
Little
can escape
bastard.
the sorrows of the human world?
You still dare to say.
In the world of flowers and
I'll
flowers,
kill you.
mandarin ducks and
Wu-Baoru
butterflies
struggled
are
crazily,
already crazy
but with
in the
two
human
senior
world.
brothers who had higher
Why
cultivation
bother
than
to
him holding
ascend
him
to the
down?
blue sky?
How could he
Why
break
not
free?
sleep together gently?
Yuqiancho thought
At
to
the
himself,
end of the song,
is this old
White
fellow
Fox
going
was
crazy
already
from
standing
anger?
there in a daze.
TSK. Chu Pinger,
With such
who
poor
was at
mental
the entrance of the
fortitude,
cave,
he still
looked at the
imitated
ugly
others to
perverted
be a
thief
hooligan.
in disbelief and murmured,
But it's
his
good that
voice
he's
is
mad.
so moving.
I'll give him some stimulation.
A person who can make such a good
Martial
song
Uncle
must
Wu,
have a good
you
character.
dare to do it, but you can't
Could
let
it be
me
that
say
I
it.
really wronged him last time?
Ugh. Sister
Yuqiancho
White
clutched his chest
What
as
do you
if he
think
was
of my
having a heart
song?
attack.
Is it
He
acceptable?
staggered a few steps,
Yuqiancho
opened his
asked
arms,
with a little
and shouted
uncertainty.
to the sky, "Heavens!"
White Fox's eyes
Open
looked
your
ahead in a
eyes and
daze
take
and
a
nodded.
look.
Her
There's
slender
actually
fingers
such a
stroked the
crazy
strings of
person
the
in this
zither
world.
and her red lips moved slightly.
After he stood up shakily,
The sound
he
of the
pointed at
zither accompanied
Wu-Baoru
by
and
the
said
song
hysterically,
flowed out slowly
"I have
like
no
a
enmity
river of
with
autumn
you.
water.
Why do you
stirring
treat me like
people's
this?"
hearts.
The
Why do
listeners
you treat me
also
like
sighed
this?
sadly.
His grief
Chu
and anger
Pinger
made
listened to
people
it a few
cry.
times and secretly
Martial
memorized
Uncle
the
Yu
song.
is so pitiful.
Then, she
Some of
quietly
the female
returned.
disciples in front of the hall choked
Yuqiancho
with
could not
sobs.
help but sigh at White
One
Fox's
carried
musical
two,
talent.
two carried three.
She could compose a song
Immediately
casually and make
many
it
of
sound
the female
interesting.
disciples began to cry.
Looking at her red lips, he could not help but think of the
When
golden
these cries
elixir
fell
that she
into
gave him.
Wu-Baoru's ears, it
Listening
was as
to
if
the
he
new
had been
song,
struck by lightning.
he sat down cross-legged.
His entire body
In
trembled,
his mind,
but he could
the
do
golden
nothing
bead
to
that was
Yuqiancho.
revolving in a certain orbit
He
in
was
his
so
dantian
angry that
appeared.
he spat out a mouthful of blood.
Yuqiancho concentrated and
Then,
observed it,
his eyes
hoping
rolled
to
back,
find something,
and he fell into his senior
the
brother's
golden
arms.
bead's surface was smooth and round.
F***CK.
After observing it for
I'm
a long
so
time,
awesome.
he
I
did not
actually
find
made an
anything
original
special.
infant stage cultivator
A
faint
strand
from
of
anger.
divine sense locked onto the
Kaka.
revolving golden bead. Wanting to
Yuqiancho
investigate
looked at the
its
person
internal
who spat
structure.
out blood with tears in his eyes.
Yuqiancho's body trembled and he,
Lu
who
Changqing's
was sitting
face
in
was
front of the
ashen.
pavilion,
Suddenly
he never
disappeared.
expected that sending
In the
Wu-Baoru to look for
pavilion, White
Yuqiancho
Fox
would
stop
cause such
playing
trouble.
and singing.
His eyes
Her
swept
beautiful
back
eyes
and
stared
forth
at the
between the
place
two
where
of them,
Yuqiancho
but he
was
couldn't
sitting.
tell who was the victim.
She frowned slightly
When
and
he
spread
saw
out a
that
powerful
Wu-Baoru had
divine
fainted,
sense to
he
search
immediately
everywhere.
stared at Yuqiancho.
Within a radius of a few
But the
hundred
latter's
meters,
face was
there
so
was no
thick
trace
that he
of
couldn't be
anyone.
seen through so easily.
She softly exclaimed in surprise. She did not expect that with her current cultivation,
Chapter 19.
there was actually someone who could
The
slip
two
away
senior
under
martial
her
brothers
eyes.
who were holding on to
In an
Wu-Baoru
open
sensed that he
space
had
with a
really
radius of a
fainted,
few hundred
and they
meters,
nodded at the sect leader.
Yuqiancho was alone and looked
The
around
elders
in
were all
astonishment.
experienced fellows,
The
and they
open
could
space
understand
was
each other's
desolate, and there was
intentions
no
with just a
sign of
glance.
life. At the end of
Naturally,
the open
they
space,
understood what
the
the two of them
surroundings
were
were
thinking.
immersed in purple chaos.
They had originally suspected
Where is
Yuqiancho,
and with Wu-Baoru's
why did I come
cultivation,
here?
if he really wanted to kill
Yuqiancho
him,
muttered and
he
shouted,
wouldn't have been
"Is
able
there
to come
anyone
here?
here?"
Now,
Is there anyone
a
here?
nascent soul-stage junior
The
martial
surroundings
brother
were
had
dead
actually
silent.
fainted from
There
anger,
was no sound
and
at
it was
all.
easy to imagine the
He
injustice
ran to
he
the
had
edge of the
suffered.
chaos at the end of the
Where are
open
the law
space and
enforcement
wanted to rush
disciples?
over to see what was there.
Lu Changqing shouted.
However, no matter how much
Here.
effort he put in, he could
Several
not go
people
over it.
appeared on both sides of
After
the hall.
tossing and turning in the desolate
plaza
open space
immediately
for half
became
a day,
silent,
and
Yuqiancho
everyone looked
was so
towards the front
tired
of the
that he was
hall,
gasping for
knowing
breath.
that the sect leader was about
He
to make
laid
a
on the
decision.
ground and thought about what was going
Before
on.
the truth is clear,
In
the
his
disciples
mind,
cannot
he thought about the
criticize.
revolving golden bead in his
Let's put this
dantian.
matter aside for now.
At that time,
when Elder Wu
he
recovers,
released a strand
the
of
truth
divine
will
sense
naturally
to
be
investigate,
clear. And then this happened.
Lu Changqing spoke
Could this
first,
be the world
and then
inside the
stared
golden
at the two
bead?
who were complaining.
Elder Wu chased
Thinking
and beat
about
up a
this,
disciple in public,
Yuqiancho
and
suddenly
everyone
jumped
saw
up
it with
and
their
sank
own
his mind
eyes.
into his dantian to
He will
search
be in
for the
prison
golden
to
bead.
recuperate and await
His
punishment.
dantian was empty except for his
Yuqiancho
innate
publicly
chi.
insulted a teacher.
The
The golden
and everyone
bead
heard
had
it with their own
disappeared.
ears.
He said in
He will be
surprise,
punished to do
could
hard
this
labor
really
in the
be inside
spirit
the
stone
golden
mine
bead
and await punishment?
Clenching his teeth,
Elders,
he tried to
do you
release his
have any
divine
objections?
sense out of his body.
None of the elders
He would
had
not
any
know
objections.
if he did not try. But when
The
he
disciples
tried,
naturally
he was
didn't
shocked.
dare to have any objections
With
to
his
the sect
cultivation
leader's
level,
decision.
his divine sense
However,
could only go
everyone
1 or 2
understood
meters
that this
outside
punishment
his
was
body.
clearly to the disadvantage
However,
of Yu Qianqiu.
in this place,
it could
one
extend
had to know that
infinitely
the
and
spirit
only
stone
stopped when
mine
it
was
reached
not a
the
place
edge
for
of
people to
chaos.
stay. It was clearly a place where
was shocked.
Sung's disciples were exiled.
This distance was something that only people with a core formation cultivation level could do,
or those who had committed
After
crimes.
he retracted his divine sense,
every day
he suddenly felt that this open space with a
stones,
circumference of a
and
few
if they
hundred
couldn't
meters
complete
seemed to be
the
connected
task,
to his heart.
they would be severely punished.
It was as if he could know where
Until
and
now,
what was in this place.
not many people had returned alive
Behind
from
that small
place.
slope, there is a black
In everyone's
stone.
eyes, Yu Qianqiu was
Qianqiu
obviously
muttered.
the victim, but
He
he
ran
ran
over
over
to
to
take a
take
look.
punishment, which inevitably
Sure
made
enough,
people think of the time when
he tried a
offended the
few
sect
more
leader
times
and
everything
grandson.
worked.
This
He was
clearly
having a lot of
revenge.
fun playing around.
No one dared to say
One
anything,
time,
and
he
could
had a
only
sudden
shake their
thought,
heads and
"I want to
sigh
go
in their
there."
hearts. When he
When
realized
Lu
that
Xingguang
the terrain
saw that
around
Yu
him had
Qianqiu
was sent to the
he was
spirit
shocked.
stone mine as a punishment.
After trying
he
a
was
few more
delighted.
times,
He realized
However,
that he could
he
actually
also
move
felt that his
freely in this
grandfather
place.
was being
too obvious by
In
doing
other
this in
words,
front of
he
everyone.
could go wherever he wanted.
Marshal nephew Yu,
It was
do you
just
have
a
any
matter of
objections?
thinking.
Gradually,
Chongqing
Yu
asked
Qianqiu
coldly.
realized that in this small
This
space,
disciple is
he
willing
had a
to
feeling
accept
that
the
he was in
punishment.
control of
I
the
dare
whole
not have any
situation.
complaints.
For some
Yu
unknown
Qianqiu's
reason,
expression
this
was
space,
bleak as he
which was
replied,
originally as
causing
bright as
all the
day,
disciples
gradually
to feel
darkened.
sad.
Yu Qianqiu stood there alone.
Little did he know that when he
felt
heard
like
that
he
he
was
was going
to a
crazy,
spirit stone mine.
he
His
could
heart
not
began
help
to
but
beat
shout
wildly.
hysterically, "I want light!
With a wave
I
of the
want
sect
light!"
leader's hand,
At
Elder
this
Wu was
moment,
carried
he
away.
realized that he was not the
Yu
god of
Qianqiu
creation
was also
here.
escorted to the spirit
He could get
stone
whatever
mine
he
by
wanted.
the disciplinary disciples.
Am I going to be imprisoned here for the rest of my
stared
life?
at the lonely and staggering figure
But there is
and bit her
nothing to
lips.
eat here.
She
Am I
simply
going
could
to
not
starve to
imagine the
death?
scene of such a talent
Boo-hoo.
working hard in a spirit stone
Yu
mine.
Qianqiu's heart was filled
The
with
sun
endless
hung
sorrow.
high in the sky. He sat on the
Outside
ground
the
and
spirit
wailed. Stone mine. There
Tears
was a row
flowed
of
down his
caves
face
on
as he
each side.
cried,
I don't want to die.
These were the living quarters of the
Someone
mining
save
disciples.
I
On
want
a
to go
piece
back.
of empty land
Brother
in front
Cho.
of them,
Almost 100 dirty
What happened
and
to
ragged
you?
disciples were gathered
The
together.
white fox's gentle voice
on a
entered
stone
his
pillar in
ears.
front of them, a disciple
Yu
was
Qianqiu's
stripped
body
naked,
shook,
and his hands and feet
He
were
wiped
chained
away
to
his
the pillar.
tears and his eyes lit up.
Whack! He was sitting in a
Whack.
stone cave.
A barbed whip
The
danced
ladder
in the
jumped
air,
up high
and
and
a string
laughed
of flesh
maniacally.
and blood splattered everywhere.
I'm finally out.
Every lash of the
You
whip
almost
was
scared
followed
me
by
to
a
death.
blood-curdling scream.
Hee hee. The surrounding
The white
disciples
fox
were all
looked at the
shocked.
lively Yu Qianqiu, who
A
was about to
bare-chested,
lose his mind.
fierce-looking cultivator paced
She frowned
back and
and
forth
asked,
with his hands
"Brother
behind his
Cho,
back.
Why did you
This
suddenly
person was an
disappear
early-stage
and
core
reappear?
formation cultivator
What are you
named Gao
doing?"
Shiping. Big sister
He was
is
the
confused.
overseer of this spirit stone mine.
Hearing the white fox's words,
He was glaring at the
Qianqiu
frightened
finally
disciples
woke up
like a
from his
tiger
crazy
watching its
state.
prey.
He waved his
viciously
hand and
said,
smiled.
"Do you see that?
Don't worry.
This is
don't
the
worry.
consequence of stealing
I
spirit
haven't
stones.
figured it out yet.
I'm warning
When
you
I
all,
figure it out,
listen carefully.
I'll tell Big Sister White first.
Don't think that you can get away with it.
I'm going to
No
confirm
one can
something
fish
now.
in troubled waters under my
Under
watch."
the former's astonished gaze,
As he
the
spoke,
latter ran
he
out of the
suddenly
cave.
saw a flash of light in
Hee
the
hee.
distance.
I was
Two
right.
law enforcement disciples
It's already
landed with
dark
a dejected
outside.
disciple.
Yu
Gao
Qianqiu
Shiping's
laughed
fierce-looking
proudly.
face was covered with a
In
smile.
the blink of an eye, a few
He
days
ran over and
passed.
said with a flattering smile,
These days,
"Long
the
time
white
no
fox
see.
was not in the
Two
mood to
senior
play
law
the zither and
enforcement
sing
brothers.
because of the madman Yu
You've sent
Qianqiu.
someone to me again."
He ran in and
As
out
he
of the
spoke,
cave from day
he
to
glanced
night.
at the dejected disciple.
He was extremely busy.
This person was Yu Qianqiu,
If he wasn't
who
hugging
was
a bunch
punished
of
to do
flowers
hard
and
labor in the
grass,
spirit
he would
stone
capture
mine.
some birds and beasts.
The two law enforcement disciples
He would run to the
nodded.
pavilion and suddenly
When they
disappear.
heard the whip and the blood-curdling
He would
scream,
appear again
they
for a
looked
long
towards
time
the
or a
place where the
short
punishment
time.
was being carried out.
His mouth was smiling
One of
so
them frowned
widely
and
that he
asked,
never closed
"Junior
it.
Marshal Brother Gao,
The white
what
fox
did that
could not
person do
help
this
but
time?"
ask him what he was doing a few
Senior
times.
Marshal Brother, this person
He always
is very
said that he was
hateful.
not in a hurry.
He actually dared
One
to
day,
secretly
she
absorb
saw
the
him
spirit
disappear in
stones
front of
mined
the
in the
pavilion.
spirit stone mine.
Half a day later,
When he came out,
she suddenly
they
saw
saw
him
him
holding
holding
a
a
fragrant
fragrant
and
and
piping
out.
hot chicken leg in his
According
hand.
to the rules,
he was
punished
chewing
with
on it
500
until his mouth
lashes,
was covered
Gao
in oil.
Shiping said.
The white
The
fox
other law
could not help
enforcement
but ask
disciple
again,
shook his head
Brother
and sighed.
Cho. I've
What's
never
going
heard of
on?
anyone surviving under Junior Marshal Brother Gao's wolf fang
Chapter
whip. 14. Yu Qianqiu
Yu
glanced
Qianqiu
over and
chuckled.
saw the barbed wolf fang
He
whip
tore off a
carrying
piece of
string
meat
of flesh and
chewed it in
blood.
his mouth.
He was secretly
Just as he
shocked.
swallowed, his face froze.
He thought to himself,
as if he was
what
choking.
magic treasure. He patted
I
his
still
chest,
want to steal
and a pot of
spirit
wine
stones.
appeared in his other hand. hand. I don't know if it's dangerous. He gulped down a few mouthfuls, and finally let out a burp. If I don't give a heavy punishment, he smiled and everyone told the white fox about the golden bead, I really won't be able to answer to the latter was dumbfounded. Gao she never thought that the golden bead could be used in such a way. And asked the two law enforcement disciples, "Why is this disciple here? Aren't you tired of staying in this dark place?" One of the law enforcement disciples shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Do you want to come to my territory?" Marshal
It's
Uncle
much
House
quieter
disciple,
there. What
and
else
no
do you
one will
think?
disturb you.
Ah.
The white fox looked at Yu Qianzhou non-committally and said softly, Brother Shiping was shocked. Didn't you say that you want to make a name for yourself in the cultivation world? Had already nodded to confirm. I see that you haven't cultivated that all these days. Hey. After saying that, Junior Marshal she continued to play the zither and sing softly. You really have guts. Playing with things can distract one's ambition. Leader. Yu Qianzhou thought about how he definitely spent the past few days playing with things. After that, and felt a little he turned around and shouted, Someone he threw away the pheasant leg in his hand. Yu Qianzhou knew that he was famous in Onquansung. It fell but into he didn't the pool expect that there would be people who knew about this the white fox who was playing the zither frowned slightly. Soon after, sitting down, the supervisor ran over and took Yu Qianzhou away under Gao Shiping's arrangement. He closed his eyes could vaguely hear one of the law enforcement disciples saying, Junior Marshal Brother Gao, absorbed the spiritual energy and converted it into vital energy. The elder specifically said that he still has a use for us. He threw the waste rock into the water, brought him to the group of disciples who were mining the mine. In his hands. First, when he converted the spiritual energy inside them into vital energy, he found that his body was filled with vital energy. Yu Qianzhou didn't have any reaction. His dantian could no longer contain it. He also didn't think that the disciple who was being punished was worthy of pity. These spirit stones since you dared to steal, then you should be prepared to be caught. He had only absorbed 6 mid-grade spirit stones. You don't deserve other people's and the converted vital energy was enough for him to cultivate. He looked around at the disciples who were mining the mine. If he absorbed spiritual energy all of them from the air, skinny. How many years would it take to compare to 6 when they saw the punishment being carried out on their dirty faces? Without hesitation, the rest of their expressions were numb and submissive. Of the mysterious heaven skill he let out a long sigh in his heart. It was actually very easy to cultivate living under oppression for a level of the chi refinement realm. This group of supervisors was really ruthless. It was not as difficult as opening the 8 extraordinary meridians from the first pillar was already dead, but they still didn't let go of the absorbed enough spiritual energy. They only stopped when the wolf-fang whips had smashed the corpse into pieces. After a few days, when Yu Qianzhou refined the last bit of true chi in his body into his dantian, a cold light flashed in his entire body trembled. Could it be that they had a grudge against every cell in his body had undergone a qualitative change? They actually wanted to whip the corpse to vent their hatred. He thought to himself, after that, finally reached the miners were chased back to their respective Checking the changes in his dantian, Yu Qianzhou was led to a place by the supervisor, which used to be filled with true energy. The space had become empty, with only a few wisps of true energy floating around. There were already 3 people lying on the ground. True energy was incomparable to this tangible true energy. Would have to squeeze together. The supervisor said he directed a strand of Daiji from his dantian into his body. Xiaotian, tell him what to do next. As soon as this strand left his dantian, the last sentence turned into a young man lying on the ground, filling his entire body with explosive power. When the young man called Shi Xiaotian heard the supervisor's words, mysterious heaven methods corresponding offensive art. Yu Qianzhou opened his eyes abruptly and slammed his palm into anything else and turned to leave. Bang! Shi Xiaotian's face was very dirty in a stone room, but one could vaguely tell that he was exploded a few meters high before falling back down. Yu Qianzhou had also stayed in the cultivation world for a long time. Yu Qianzhou stopped cultivating someone's age by their appearance. His smiling face froze. Big eyes looked at this newcomer blankly. The white fox was staring at him with her beautiful eyes. Yu Qianzhou smiled at Shi Xiaotian him for disturbing her playing the zither. However, Shi quickly got up and begged to appreciate it. The white fox rolled her eyes at him and was too lazy to argue with him. She continued to play the zither and sang. Yesterday was like the east flowing water, far away from me. A custom-made pickaxe and a basket that could be carried on one's back from listening to the song. After they were done, he turned around and sat down with his back facing the white fox, and the 2 of them returned to the cave. 2 spirit stones appeared in his hands, Yu Qianzhou really wanted to ask him what was the so-called magical equipment that could be checked. The tangible true energy in my dantian has almost reached any of his questions. The mining rules didn't sound difficult. Who was sitting cross-legged in front of the pavilion, suddenly jumped up and screamed. Each person had to hand in a high-grade spirit stone every day. Where are my spirit stones? In other words, you could take 100 middle-grade spirit stones or 10,000 low-grade spirit stones. The white fox was startled by him and could not continue playing anymore. If you couldn't complete the task, you couldn't rest or eat. She opened her red lips and was about to scold him. For cultivators, but Yu Qianzhou's figure suddenly disappeared. Even if you couldn't eat or rest for a day or two, and her slender fingers stroked the strings of the zither, it was fine. A homophonic sound rang in the cave. That if you couldn't complete the task today, the difference would be doubled the next day. Where did my spirit stones go? If you couldn't complete the task in 3 days, lying on the grass, the punishment would be based on the difference. Suddenly, a figure appeared out of nowhere and the task in excess, scaring the deer into running away. The excess could be accumulated until the next time you didn't complete the task. Yu Qianzhou returned to the world inside the golden bead. Alternatively, you could enjoy 1% of the
place
excess
was already
spirit
filled with
stones.
flowers and plants.
The miner could choose
two
between
colorful
the two
pheasants,
methods, one male and
if
one
someone
female.
chose the latter,
We're talking
then
about
you had to
love.
guarantee that you could complete
They were
the
also
task
startled
every
by him
time.
and flew away.
Otherwise,
He
you
did
would
not
still be
care
punished
so
because your
much.
previous excess spirit
He found the
stones
cloth
had
bag
already
given
been
by
used
his
up.
master and rummaged for
The
a
strictest
while.
rule was that if someone
Then,
dared to steal
he seemed
spirit
to have thought of
stones or
something.
secretly absorb spirit
He
stones
slapped
in the
his
cave,
forehead and
they
sat
would
on the
be
ground,
dead if they were
crying.
discovered.
As for these rules,
The spirit
Yu
stones
Qianqiu
are used
remembered
up
them.
so quickly.
He wasn't worried
This is
about
really
being punished for
terrible.
completing the task.
One had to know that spirit
Instead,
stones were
he
not
was
that
thinking
easy
about
to
how to
obtain.
steal spirit stones without
Within
being
Ong
discovered while
Kwansung's sphere
ensuring
of
that he could
influence,
complete the task.
there were a few spirit stone mines.
This way, he could continue
Every
to stay
month,
in the spirit stone
stones
cave and
mined were
continue
distributed
stealing.
by the sect.
In his current situation,
Seniors living in
if he wanted
seclusion
to
in the back
increase his
mountain could
cultivation
receive
level,
2 high-grade
he really
spirit
needed
stones
spirit
every
stones.
month.
Sect
Now
leader
that the
could
opportunity
receive 1
was right in
high-grade
front of
spirit
him,
stone.
it was impossible for him
Elders
not to
could
steal.
receive 50 mid-grade spirit
This was because his
stones.
way of thinking was no
Core
different from his
formation
previous
disciples
life.
could receive 25 mid-grade spirit stones.
The principle that
Foundation
a horse
building
wouldn't get fat
disciples
without
could
night
receive
grass
10
and a man
mid-grade
wouldn't
spirit
get rich
stones
without a
and
windfall
250
was deeply
low-grade
engraved in his
spirit stones.
consciousness.
Also,
What worried him the
disciples
most
who
was
were
the
chi
magic
refining
tool that
level
Gao
4
Shaping
and
mentioned.
above could receive 500
If he hid
low-grade
spirit stones in the
every
golden
month.
bead, he didn't know
The
if it would
amount
be
of spirit
discovered.
stones mined by Ong
The sound of
Kwansung every
snoring
month was
echoed in
not
the
a
cave,
small amount in the
making Yu
cultivation
Qianqiu
world.
very surprised.
However,
How
there
could
were more than
cultivators
1,000
sleep so
people.
soundly?
It was impossible to let everyone have their fill. They could only strictly distribute the spirit stones
He really
according
wanted
to their
to hide
rank.
in the golden bead world,
Because this
but he was
involved
afraid
everyone's
that someone would
interest.
discover his
Even the
sudden
sect leader did
disappearance.
not dare to be biased.
He could only endure the 3 people's
Otherwise,
continuous
not only would he
snoring.
lose his position as
The
the
next
sect
day,
leader,
Yu
he might
Qianqiu
even be
discovered
beaten
that
to death.
everyone here was minding their own
Of course,
business.
only half of the spirit
No one would pay
stones mined
attention to
every
him.
month were distributed.
He imitated the 3
The other
people,
half was the
carrying
sect's
a basket
public
on his
property.
back and carrying a pickaxe.
Naturally, this was to buy
He
and
followed
sell
them
some
to the
necessities.
entrance of the spirit stone mine.
Or if a disciple of the
He
sect
stood
made
in the
some
crowd and looked
contributions,
around,
it could
looking
also
very
be used
different.
as a reward.
Especially
Yu
his clothes,
Qianqiu had
which were
already
many
reached
times
chi
cleaner
refining
than the
level
others,
4
were
and
very
above.
eye-catching.
He could receive 500 low-grade spirit stones every month. This was
Chapter
to hide
20.
some things.
He
did not report it and did
Don't
not
look
go
around.
through the sex assessment.
I'm talking to you.
If he did not report it,
Come here.
he would not receive his salary.
The supervisor at the cave
In
entrance
fact,
pointed at Yu
how Sanchi's
Qianqiu
50
and shouted
mid-grade
rudely.
spirit stones every month
Only
were
then
not
did the
enough.
latter realize that the
The
people in
dozen
front
or
of him
so
had
that Yu
already gone
Qianqiu
in.
used were taken out from
He
his
hurried
mouth.
over.
The
The
supervisor took out a bronze
Without
mirror
spirit
and shone it at
stones,
him.
how can I continue
A
to
white
cultivate?
light flashed on the mirror.
Even if I could get
Could
500
this be a
low-grade
magic
spirit
tool?
stones every month,
While he was
it would
still
only
puzzled,
be equivalent
the
to 5
supervisor
mid-grade
pushed him
spirit
into the
stones.
mines.
You're
Currently,
dressed like a
third
dog.
of the chi in my dantian was
Next,
used up to 10 mid-grade
he
spirit
heard the words
stones.
of the supervisor behind him.
If I want to
but he didn't
cultivate
think
to chi
much about
refining
it.
level 6,
He
I
looked
need another
around the
20
mine.
mid-grade spirit stones.
It was pitch
which
black.
is equivalent to 2,000
He
low-grade
really
spirit
didn't know how to
stones.
dig spirit stones in
I
this
would
kind
need
of
4
environment.
months of low-grade spirit
He
stones
slowed
to
down
cultivate
and walked
to chi
in.
refining level 6.
After his eyes gradually
If I want to
adapted to
cultivate
the
to
darkness,
chi refining
he heard
level
the sound
10.
of several
How
people
many
running
spirit
in.
stones would I need?
Gold ingots dropped in
Yu
front.
Qianqiu was a little
He
dispirited.
really had to give it to them.
He had used 6
They could
middle-grade
even run in
spirit
this kind of
stones to
environment.
advance to the 5th level of
While
the
he
chi
was shaking
refining
his head,
stage.
he suddenly noticed
In the
that there were
end,
sporadic
from the 5th
lights
level
on the
to
walls
the
around
6th
the
level.
mine.
He had used
What
nearly
was
10
this?
middle-grade spirit stones.
As he moved forward,
The
there were
Jin Chi
more
in his
and more
dantian
sporadic
was not
lights.
even a third of the original
They
amount.
covered the 4 walls.
The
even
amount of
under
Jin
his
Chi
feet.
needed to advance to the next
It made
level
him
was
feel like
clearly
he was
increasing
walking
on a starry
exponentially.
avenue. If he
When he got
cultivated to the
closer,
late
he
stage of
discovered that they
tribulation
were
passing
actually
stage,
fluorites.
he would need a mountain of spirit
They were
stones.
obviously not installed by
Yu
humans.
Qianqiu was really worried.
They were naturally formed.
He was like his name.
This also explained
Without
why
the
he could dig for
surname,
spirit
he was called
stones in the
Qianqiu.
cave even without any light.
If he had never used
He stood
spirit
at a few
stones
forks
before,
in the tunnel
it
and
would
was
have been
choosing
fine.
which one to enter.
But now that he
Suddenly,
had, another
could he still
miner rushed
foolishly
into each
absorb
of the
the
heaven
forks in
and
a
heard
hurry?
spiritual chi like before.
Although he didn't know why,
If he wanted
there must
to
be a
rely on
reason
it to
why
increase
everyone
his
was so
cultivation,
anxious.
he was afraid that even if he
Thinking
had
of
the
this,
patience,
he didn't
he would
hesitate
not have that
anymore.
long of a life. He randomly picked a hole and quickly
There was another
walked
thing
in.
that he did not know.
The mine was deep and
The volume
low. of his dantian was 3 times that of an average person. The more crossroads he found, like a spider web. If an average person used 2 days to cultivate their dantian, he was really worried that if he went in too much, he wouldn't be able to get out. In fact, an average person only needed a third of the amount of spirit stones for being used to cultivate their dantian. Since the terrain was downward, when he wanted to go out, he just had to go to a higher place. The spirit stones he gave him were based on 1 month minus the time needed to cultivate his dantian by 4 levels. He didn't know where to dig. In other words, so he picked a hole with a louder sound and prepared for his disciple to cultivate his dantian by 1 level. Hearing the sound, there is no other way. There were several low-grade for Master to come back and think of a way, including a middle-grade one. Yu Qianqiu dejectedly stood up. A miner was waving his pick and digging with all his might. Pheasants were cooing. Ha! From the sound, not bad, they were probably laying eggs. I've already gained something. This was exactly what Yu Qianqiu wanted when he caught them. Yu Qianqiu smiled enthusiastically. He deliberately caught a male and a female. He put down the basket on his back. Eggs and hatch more pheasants. He held the pickaxe and looked around, looking for a place to start anytime. The tinkling sound suddenly stopped. He was not in the mood to do so now. He turned around and saw that the miner was looking at him warily and looked at it. He nodded and smiled again. He lowered his head again. Obviously, the miner did not welcome him. He raised his head again and cried out in surprise. His smile was a little awkward. Looking around, his territory had doubled from its original base, the miner said bluntly. Now, it probably had a radius of nearly a kilometer. Yu Qianqiu was a little angry. Yu Qianqiu closed his eyes. Damn it. Although it had grown bigger, so why are you still under his control? However, he couldn't see through the other person's cultivation level. It did not take that the other person's cultivation level was higher than his. This golden pearl had already become one with spoil great plans. If he did not guess wrong, even though he was cultivation increased by 1 level, cause of the territory here would double from its original base. He decided to swallow his anger. Seeing this happy thing, he rolled his eyes, the worry of not having spirit stones, and walked out with a sullen face. He wandered around his own territory and returned to the pavilion. In every small hole, with regards to his sudden appearance and disappearance, when they saw him, they would bluntly announce, "This is my territory, raised her head and looked at him." She stopped playing the zither and asked that almost everyone he saw had a higher cultivation level than him. "Are you going back?" He wanted to find someone to vent his anger, but there was no one to vent it on. It has already been a few days. Now he finally understood why those people ran after entering the mine. By now. They were all afraid that the spirit he turned around and discovered last time would be taken by someone else. So they rushed. "I will come to see you often." In a fit of anger, he walked towards the deepest part of the mine. He returned to how many yards he had been digging, how long he had walked, strangely, and how many found that Master had not returned. Finally, if he had reached the end of the mine, the ground would not be so clean. There shouldn't be anyone chasing me out and wiped it. He cursed and put down the basket. He had to admit that the air quality now was not a bit better than in his previous life. In front of him was a dead end. Life, if the room was not clean for a few days, spirit stones the dust would be thicker than it was now after a month. He raised the pickaxe with both hands. He turned around and lay down. Ding! Ah! Damn it! Why are there so many people running in the direction of green light hole? Threw the pickaxe to the side. Yu Qianqiu, he raised his pretending to be asleep, woke up and sat up slightly. He shook his hands and picked up the pickaxe to test it on the surrounding walls. It was not a problem for him to hear a nearby jog. Everywhere was as hard as stone. Closed his eyes and lay down. No wonder the sound of digging sounded like blacksmithing. It's none of my business if something happens. He was too impatient. Not long after he tried again and didn't know whether to laugh or someone outside the courtyard shouting, "How was this? Is Marshal Uncle Yu in?" This was clearly after shouting twice. Yu Qianqiu responded. In the past, he felt really strange that someone was looking for him. Stones grew in such a place. When he walked out of the courtyard, the amount of unfamiliar stones used by so many people in Marshal Uncle Yu depended on these people to dig them out bit by bit. Green Light Hall quickly. Even though he heard that there were other spirits me to go to Green Light other places, the miners there probably didn't have it easy either. Yu Qianqiu asked curiously. He tried to inject qi into the pickaxe. It was true. Ding, no one had ever looked for him, not to mention the sect master who had led him to Huangsang. Yu Qianqiu, the disciple's expression was perturbed, as if there was something he could not say. He swung his arms and dug with all his might. After a moment of silence, it was good to have enthusiasm for work, but not being able to produce results was often the most painful assembly. He dug for a long time. He accidentally found not to mention spirit stones. He didn't even see a single hair. Because the Luo sect interfered with the continuous consumption of the qi in his body. In the end, he was unable to keep up with the expenditure, and because Elder Hao's injury was too serious, he would die of exhaustion before he could dig up any spirit stones. Changed. He was no longer in the mood to listen and ran towards Green Light Hall like a wisp of smoke. He immediately stopped and decided to figure out what the problem was. Based on the limited common sense from his previous life, there was a group of people whispering in the closet in front of the green light hole. Things such as gold and precious stones in the crowd, all had their own 10 disciples wrapped in bandages, obviously injured. He believed that the same principle applied to spirit stones. Ran into the crowd, and when the crowd saw him, could be found everywhere should be associated with spirit stones. A few injured elders were sitting cross-legged on the ground, must have been dug by the miners in the past. There were people treating their injuries. If they stopped here, in the middle, mean that there were no more spirit stones his ahead. Body covered with a white cloth. He didn't understand this point, so he couldn't make a judgment. Who rushed into the crowd, calmed down to find someone to ask, but the miners here would probably get the injured elders, and his master was not among them. What a headache! His gaze fell on the white cloth, and his face twitched as he slowly walked over. Why am I so stupid? In an instant, the plaza became incomparably quiet, and a few hundred pairs of eyes silently followed as an expert in digging holes. Yu Qianqiu squatted down, and the hand that stretched towards the white cloth trembled uncontrollably. After confirming that there was no one, the knuckles that pinched the corner of the white cloth were abnormally pale, and as if he was carrying a heavy object, he slowly lifted it up. Yu Qianqiu, the sloppy old man's familiar face shouted a few times as the white cloth was lifted up. A forest suddenly appeared still vivid in his mind, but the amiable old man was no longer breathing, and a familiar melody came from the forest. Your cultivation for the purple chaos around him, he would have suspected that he had gone to the wrong place. I want to rely on sect leader Shixiang to help out. So tomorrow I will lead a team with a few other bamboo house appeared in front of him. When the time comes, when the foundation building pills are distributed, you have the nerve to ask surrounded by a bamboo to prepare for your foundation building. There was a small bamboo pavilion inside, when they parted, and a beautiful woman in white was playing the zither and singing. Looking at the old man's deathly pale face, if not the white and that smear of dried blood at the corner of his mouth, who was relieved, looked around again and smiled with satisfaction. If it wasn't for him, Master definitely wouldn't participate in some bullshit new talent assembly. He couldn't help but admire it. The squatting Yu Qianqiu had already unknowingly its aesthetic standards were higher than ordinary people. His trembling hands carefully covered the white cloth, forest surrounded the bamboo, as if he was afraid of disturbing the bamboo forest surrounded the bamboo house. He suddenly opened up his arms, the environment was quiet, and raised his head to the sky. He didn't expect that the thing he had thrown in a few days ago would be turned into this by the white fox in just a few days. His white teeth looked abnormally eerie under the sunlight, appropriate and pleasing, and the veins on his neck popped out. He walked in with a smile. Suddenly, under the gaze of the crowd, although the white fox didn't even raise her actually spat out a mouthful of blood. Tribulation passing stage the few elders who were treating the injured turned their heads in unison when they heard the voice. Yu Qianqiu walked to the pavilion and called out with surprise, "Sister Bai." Some of the female disciples couldn't help but cry out in surprise. She didn't even imagine that there would actually be such a deep relationship between master and disciple in the cultivation world that was cold and emotionless. He didn't know how he had offended her. Everyone sighed endlessly when they thought about how on Guangsang's trash life wouldn't be any better if he left the protection of his master. Yu Qianqiu sat at the side with a mischievous smile. Chu Ping'er, who was stuck his head out and said, could no longer associate the peeping Tom with Yu playing the zither, who was vomiting blood in front of her. This young man greets you. Recalling that the two peerless songs came from this person, she could not help but tear up, her eyes filled with pity. To be honest, after this younger brother left her someone shouted. She couldn't even see his shadow for a few days. Lu Changqing walked out of the Cyan Light Palace. It made her feel like she had just been released from captivity, who walked out and behind him all had ashen faces. How could she not be angry? Lu Changqing stood in front of Yu Qianqiu. She couldn't do anything about this shameless person. His eyes swept over the blood on the ground and looked at the bloodstain at the corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth. The sound of the zither stopped. He sighed and said, "Since it has already happened," his face turned slightly red. "Please restrain your grief." She raised her head and said angrily, "Yu Qianqiu, do you still remember that you have a sister like me?" Didn't even raise his eyelids when he heard the voice. "If you have the ability, then don't come back." He just said in a frighteningly calm voice, "Are you digging for spirit stones? I just want to know what's going on." The last sentence was said when she saw the thing in Yu Qianqiu's hand. They didn't expect that he didn't even have the slightest bit of respect in front of the sect leader. The white fox's words made him feel a little without the protection of your master. It was like a wife who had been living alone at home for a few days and finally saw her dead husband. A handsome young man walked out of the crowd and walked toward Yu Qianqiu with a face full of anger. He avoided the question and replied. Lu Changqing looked at the kneeling man and frowned slightly. You saw through it with one look. He then stopped the handsome young man with his eyes. He then told the white fox about how he was punished to do hard labor and that he was the sect leader's grandson. However, he hid the fact that he had wronged Lu Jingguo. His appearance caused many female disciples to have a strange look in their eyes. No one would want to expose their despicable and shameless side to the public. He told the white fox that because he had offended sect leader Lu Chongqing, and now that his master was beside him in a deep voice, he was immediately attacked by the sect leader for revenge. "I'll let you tell everyone what happened." He was sent to the spirit stone mine to do hard labor. The old man nodded and told the story with a livid face. If he couldn't complete the task, he would face severe punishment. It turned out that Kwang-sung found a spirit herb on his way back from the new talent assembly. Is actually so narrow-minded. It was called the seven color. The white fox frowned. What was the seven color? She stared at the smiling face in front of her and said, "It was a spirit herb of the heavens and earth. If you want to escape, no one in Kwang-sung can stop you. If it could be used in a pill to help cultivators advance, it would almost certainly help them advance. Sister is wise. How could a cultivator not regard such a thing as a treasure? You already know. And the one who found it was Yu Qianzhou's master." The white fox was slightly annoyed. Just when Kwang-sung was celebrating, she took out the mountain-piercing claw from her waist and threw it later. The cultivation world was a place where the strong preyed on the weak. He stood up and was about to leave. The Daluo sect immediately said that they were the first to find it. At the entrance of the mine, the two sides immediately clashed. Disciple holding a bronze mirror and shining it on my body. Second in the cultivation world of the Sister, do you know what it's used for? Kwang-sung was just a very ordinary magic tool. Naturally, it doesn't have much no match for the former. If someone secretly absorbed spiritual energy or hides spirit stones on their body, it's very easy to find out. Not only were the elders of the big sects in the cultivation some of the participating disciples were also injured. Why do you ask? The white fox asked curiously. It's nothing. Sister, if I put spirit stones in the golden bead, will the magic tool be able to find them? Yu Qianzhou asked again. The white fox lightly shook her head and said, "It can't even find spirit stones in storage bags. I think it's even harder to find the space inside the golden bead." Oh, Yu Qianzhou smiled bitterly. Since Jijia is willing to come, little brother is more than happy to come. He nodded and said, "How can I go back on my worried to death? Sister, since it can't be found, then I'm relieved." After he finished speaking, Sister, he freed one hand. White fox didn't mind that he had hugged a dead person and gently held it with her slender hand. This bastard is probably asking this to steal spirit stones. Yu Qianzhou's mind was slightly shaken. If that's the case, have any dirty wouldn't I be helping the evildoer? He immediately when she came back to her senses, on the golden bead. She wanted to stop him and ask him questions. The figure was already gone. The pavilion disappeared. In the green light hall, the sect leader was discussing matters with the elders. Chapter 21. Suddenly, a small bell appeared in the mine at the side of the hall rang. The surroundings were very quiet. He put down the pickaxe and put on the mountain-piercing claws. Said curiously, after the white infusing his spirit from the forbidden area, the gloves immediately became one with his palms. Let's go and take a look. The 10 sharp claws were dark and shiny. He flew out of the hall and the figures behind him followed. Swoosh! A group of people came to the grotto and saw that the pavilion was empty. Didn't they say that the gloves could feel spiritual energy? They looked at each other in dismay. Then let's try it. Leader Shi Xiang. He pressed his claws on the wall. If I remember correctly, there is a purple light demon trapping formation. He felt that the gloves seemed to have an impulse to pull him to the left. Those who are trapped in the pavilion can't come out unless they have reached the middle stage of the tribulation passing stage. He really felt spiritual energy. Could it be that this white fox spirit has moved the middle stage of the tribulation passing stage? It was not until they moved 3 to 4 meters from their original position that they stopped. If she really has reached the middle stage of the tribulation passing stage, it had moved wasn't there should be a lot of commotion when she goes through the heavenly tribulations in the early and middle stages. Right in front of him. How could we not know? Feel the spirit stones that he wanted to dig up. A skinny old man walked to the side of the silent Lu Qianzhou was very glad. This old man was the elder who no matter how fast he dug, it would be useless. His name was Wu Baoru. Baby, I'm coming. Lu Chongqing silently shook his head, shouted indicating that he also didn't know. His 10 claws moved, they didn't and he know rushed the reason. At the stone wall in front of him. What cultivators did was to go against the heavens and change their fate. There was no sound of clanking. Forcibly increasing one's cultivation level level was also against the heavens. The stone wall could not withstand a single blow and was destroyed in an instant. He would naturally be punished by the heavens. Not long after, a hole a few meters deep was the tribulation passing stage. The feeling in front was also getting stronger and stronger. After the white fox reached the middle stage of the nascent soul bravely, she stopped cultivating. When he clawed down and saw a crystal white part of the stone wall, there was no heaven-defying action he could not forcibly increase her cultivation level. Then he covered his mouth and laughed secretly. The punishment from the heavens couldn't be found on her. He dug out a spiritual stone. She had unknowingly reached the late stage of the tribulation passing stage because of the golden tunnel outside. In fact, he immediately went out and looked around to see that no one was around. Why didn't her cultivation level reach the late stage of the tribulation passing stage? After digging out the spiritual stone, he held it in his hand and looked at it carefully. This matter to the master who is cultivating in the back of the mountain. This was the first time he found that the spiritual stone was so beautiful. sighed. It was crystal clear and cute, have to disturb the master, no matter how he looked at it. Wu Baoru was slightly surprised. It was only a low-grade spiritual stone. He shook his head and threw the spiritual stone into the basket. Then, he patted his head again. Not knowing what he thought, he picked up the pickaxe and the basket with the low-grade spiritual stone and threw them into his space. If he continued to work hard, perhaps the superior spirit stones were just ahead. Now that he had an income, he was even more excited. He followed the feeling of mountain-piercing claw without stopping. Not long after, the occasional appearance of 1 or 2 spirit stones on the stone wall gradually increased to several spirit stones appearing at the same time. All of them were eagerly put into his own space by his fingers. Although they were all low-grade, he did not reject any of them and did not waste any of the fruits of his labor. Holy shit! Great harvest, 1, 2, 3, 9, another 10 low-grade spirit stones. The 10 low-grade spirit stones that appeared at the same time disappeared one by one as he counted with his fingers. After digging nearly 100 pieces of low-grade spirit stones, a thick white crystal appeared in front of his eyes. It was exactly the same as the middle-grade spirit stone that his master had given him. Needless to say, the first mid-tier spirit stone was in his hands. As he continued to dig, Yu Qianqiu became more and more excited. The density of the spirit stones was getting higher and higher. For every 100 low-grade spirit stones, he would find 1 mid-grade spirit stone. When he had dug out close to 100 mid-grade spirit stones, he suddenly felt something strange coming from his mountain-piercing claw. Could it be that high-grade spirit stones were about to appear? Slightly stunned, he immediately dug in that direction without any regard for his life. Of course, the correct judgment would not disappoint him. When a light golden spirit stone appeared on the stone wall, Yu Qianqiu carefully dug it out. He took off the mountain-piercing claw and held it in his hand to carefully examine it. There was no doubt about it. This was a high-grade spirit stone. It was the first time he had seen a high-grade spirit stone. He had heard from his master that it was light golden in color. The light golden spirit stone was as beautiful as amber. Under the illumination of the fluorite, it exuded an enchanting luster. Looking at it, Yu Qianqiu was dazzled. Feeling the rich spiritual energy in the spirit stone in his hand, he really wanted to inhale it into his body, but he still controlled that impulse. Not for anything else, but for the increasing number of high-grade spirit stones. He swallowed his saliva and said, "You want me to hand over such a good thing? Humph. Even if you beat me to death, I won't do it." The amber-like crystal disappeared in his hand. The white fox and the golden bead confirmed her guess. Sure enough, not long after Yu Qianqiu disappeared, spirit stones began to fall from the sky. They fell precisely in the courtyard and piled up into a small pile. She just shook her head. Those things were not tempting to her. For a person whose cultivation had reached the late stage of passing calamity, she had already reached the peak of the cultivation world. Spirit stones had no effect on her. Yu Qianqiu also discovered the rule of digging spirit stones. Every time he dug in a direction, the first spirit stone he dug would be a low-grade spirit stone. Every 100 low-grade spirit stones would be surrounded by a middle-grade spirit stone, and in nearly 100 such groups, there would only be 1 high-grade spirit stone. After knowing this rule, he was no longer interested in those low-grade spirit stones. It was a waste of time and not worth it. He directly dug out a high-grade spirit stone, which was equivalent to tens of thousands of low-grade spirit stones. Only when he was casually digging did he put the middle-grade and low-grade spirit stones into the space. Counting the time, almost a day had passed. Excluding the half of the day that was wasted, he estimated that he had dug out nearly 100 high-grade spirit stones, hundreds of middle-grade spirit stones, and thousands of low-grade spirit stones. His mood changed from excitement to disapproval. This was the psychological change from a poor person to a rich person. He probably didn't know that his income in the half of the day was equivalent to the output of this spirit stone mine in a day. This was naturally due to the contribution of the Fox clan's treasure, the mountain-piercing claw. For 3 consecutive days, he almost non-stop digging. He didn't hand in spirit stones every day like other people. The spirit stones in his hand were enough for him to hand in spirit stones for 3 days at a time. However, at the end of the second day, he felt a little hungry. After all, he hadn't reached the bearing essence stage yet. He went to the golden bead and roasted a pheasant to eat. Seeing the pile of spirit stones that almost filled half of the courtyard, he smiled very happily and sighed that his hard work was not in vain. However, the white fox warned him that if he dared to throw another spirit stone into the courtyard, she would take back the mountain-piercing claw. This threat was quite effective. After that, he threw all the spirit stones into the forest outside the courtyard. The deadline of 3 days was up. Yu Qianqiu came out carrying a basket full of spirit stones. At the entrance of the cave, there were more than 10 supervisors counting the spirit stones for the miners. He, who was at the back of the line, had to wait for a while before it was his turn. Just as he walked over, he heard someone say, "Let me see." He looked up and saw the fierce-looking Gao Shiping smiling at him. "Junior Marshal Brother Yu, I've been waiting for you to come out. I wonder how you finished the task," Gao Shiping said with a fake smile. This guy's attitude wasn't too friendly. Yu Qianqiu put the basket on the big table at the entrance of the cave and said with a smile, "It's my first time, so I'm not used to it. Fortunately, I managed to finish the task." A pile of spirit stones fell on the table, shining brightly. A trace of greed flashed in Gao Shiping's eyes, but it was quickly hidden. All of this fell into Yu Qianqiu's eyes. The corner of his mouth slightly curled up, revealing a trace of a smile. The former waved his hand, and 2 supervisors came over to count the spirit stones. "Senior Marshal Brother Gao, there's something I'd like to ask." Yu Qianqiu gestured for him to speak first. Gao Shiping frowned. He thought to himself, "I gave you some face, but you really opened a dye shop. I called you Junior Marshal Brother out of politeness, but you really dared to call me brother. Why don't you find out what kind of place this is?" Thinking of the 2 Senior Marshal Brothers' instructions, he could not offend them too much. Perhaps one day, when they returned to Angquangsung and gained power, he might have to beg them for help. He walked to the side with a sullen face and said coldly, "Junior Marshal Brother Yu, what's the matter? This is my first time here, so I'm afraid that I might have done something wrong. If I've offended you in any way, please forgive me." Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and bowed to Gao Shiping. A faint gold color flashed in his hand. He looked around and saw that no one was paying attention to him. When he lowered his hand, the faint gold color slid into the latter's clothes. Gao Shiping saw the alluring faint gold color the moment Yu Qianqiu raised his hand. He naturally knew what it was, but before he could react, it had already slipped into his clothes. Gao Shiping's body trembled, and his hand subconsciously pressed on the thing in his abdomen. His eyes flashed as he stared at Yu Qianqiu. The temptation of a high-grade spirit stone was too great, and he was considering whether or not to accept it. As a core formation stage cultivator, he could only receive 25 middle-grade spirit stones every month. A high-grade spirit stone could last him for 4 months. Although he was the supervisor of the spirit stone mine, he had never dared to take a spirit stone from here. If someone found out, the consequences would be unthinkable, especially since there were 3 nascent soul stage elders guarding this place. Gao Shiping lowered his voice and said, "It's my duty to take care of Junior Brother, but junior brother was sent here by the sect to do hard labor. If you can't complete the task or do something you shouldn't do, I can't take care of you. After all, there are 3 elders here, and there are some things that I can't decide. Hearing the meaning behind his words, Gao Shiping could take care of him, but there were some things that he could take care of, and some things that he couldn't. For example, if he couldn't complete the task, or if he stole or absorbed spirit stones. Damn it! He had the heart of a thief, but no guts. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his nose, and patted Gao Shiping's hand that was pressing on his abdomen. He smiled and said, "Senior brother, don't worry. I definitely won't do anything that would make things difficult for senior brother. I just want to live a little more freely here. I believe that this won't make things difficult for senior brother." Gao Shiping was still a little hesitant, and the supervisor shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, the task is completed, and you have received 500 low-grade spirit stones. Come over and be inspected. Senior brother, don't worry." Yu Qianqiu said softly, and walked over. The supervisor took a bronze mirror and looked at it, and didn't find anything unusual. Gao Shiping, who had been watching the scene, let out a sigh of relief, and shouted to the supervisor, "Watch it closely." After saying that, he walked over to Yu Qianqiu and smiled, "Junior brother, you got more than 500 low-grade spirit stones on your first mining trip. I've been here for so many years, and this is the first time I've seen something like this. I really admire you." He wasn't being polite. If he included the top-grade spirit stone that he collected, it would be 10,500 low-grade spirit stones. This was something that had never been seen among the newbies. Luck, pure luck. I just happened to come across a good vein," Yu Qianqiu said modestly. The 2 of them chatted and laughed as they left, and the others looked at them in disbelief. Gao Shiping had always been secretly called Butcher Gao, and countless miners had died in his hands. When had they ever seen him being so nice to the miners? Chapter 22. Coincidentally, a supervisor passed by and saw this scene. He smiled and asked Gao Shiping, "Martial uncle, who is this? Sorry to trouble you to accompany us." Yu Qianqiu turned his head to the side as if he didn't hear anything. Gao Shiping's expression sank, and he shouted at the supervisor, "Don't be rude. This is your Yu Qianqiu Shu. He only made a small mistake and was temporarily punished to work here. It won't be long before he goes back. How can you compare him to normal miners? Martial Uncle Yu. The supervisor smiled apologetically. His smile was a little insincere as he muttered in his heart, "So it's the Yu Qianqiu who offended the sect leader. If even this is a small mistake, then most of the miners here can be considered as sinners. Junior brother, don't take his words to heart. Come, let's have a drink at my place." Gao Shiping invited. Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands and smiled, "Then I'll do as you say." The 2 of them laughed and walked towards the supervisor's residence with their arms around each other's shoulders. They immediately attracted the attention of many people, especially some of the miners, whose eyes were filled with envy. The days of the supervisor were very comfortable. With a command, good wine and dishes were quickly placed on the table in the refreshing wooden house. The 2 of them were in a good mood and frequently raised their cups, drinking happily. Of course, there was a reason why the miners could rest for 1 day every 3 days. It was because the labor intensity of mining was too high and most of the miners' cultivation was below the foundation establishment stage. If they didn't rest, they would probably die from exhaustion before long. This type of work wasn't something a normal person could do. If it was a normal person, they probably wouldn't be able to dig more than a few pieces in a day. Naturally, resting was one of the ways to ensure the amount of mining. Before they left the table, Yu Qianqiu burped and said, "Speaking of which, it's quite a coincidence. Before I entered the sect, I was quite knowledgeable in the way of mining. If senior brother Gao trusts me, on the last day of every 3 days, please continue to guard the cave for me. How could Gao Shiping not understand the meaning behind this? His eyes immediately lit up. The two of them laughed heartily and confided in each other. In the end, Gao Shiping insisted on sending him off, and Yu Qianqiu found it hard to refuse his kindness. In the end, Gao Shiping sent Yu Qianqiu directly to his cave. Butcher Gao's arrival scared the other 3 people in the cave so much that they quickly got up. The two of them exhaled the smell of alcohol and called each other affectionately. It was really enviable for others. Looking at his junior brother's living environment, Gao Shiping frowned. He patted his chest and promised, "Junior brother, please bear with it for now. Tomorrow, I'll find a clean place to stay. Leave this matter to me." After Butcher Gao came, the way the 3 of them looked at Yu Qianqiu changed greatly. They became much more reserved, and they no longer dared to touch his buttocks. Yu Qianqiu understood what was going on. He looked at the 3 of them and noticed a bloody wound on Shi Xiaoyan's back. Clearly, he was whipped by the wolf Fang whip. He couldn't help but ask, "Shi Xiaotian, what happened to your back?" Hearing him called, Shi Xiaotian quickly got up and replied to his martial uncle. After seeing the relationship between Yu Qianqiu and the Lord Warden, he didn't dare to act like he did before. It turned out that Shi Xiaotian was still short of 100 low-grade spirit stones for this mission. According to the rules, he had to be whipped by the wolf Fang whip. This injury was a punishment. Seeing him speak, Yu Qianqiu asked a few more questions. Shi Xiaotian answered them one by one. Speaking of which, Shi Xiaotian was quite unlucky. His family was originally a noble in the Xia Empire. Because of his good innate talent, he was fancied by a certain core formation stage cultivator in Guangzhou, who wanted to take him as a disciple. In the Xia Empire, cultivation was a blessing that could only be encountered by chance. Naturally, his family happily agreed to take him as a disciple. Therefore, Shi Xiaotian went to Guangzhou. With his good innate talent, he reached the 4th level of the qi refining stage in the first year. However, in the second year, his master was killed by someone at the foot of the mountain. The worst thing was that he and the grandson of an elder fell in love with a female disciple at the same time. They were youngsters. It was inevitable that they would fight for a woman's affection. In the end, they angered an elder and were kicked here. When Yu Qianqiu heard that his master was also dead, he couldn't help but look at him a few more times. When he talked about fighting for a woman, he couldn't help but laugh. When he looked at Shi Xiaotian again, he felt a sense of sympathy. Therefore, he wanted to help him. "Tomorrow, you and I will go dig for spirit stones together." After speaking, Yu Qianqiu sat cross-legged and closed his eyes. Shi Xiaotian was stunned. Although he was unwilling, he didn't dare to say anything. Until many years later, when he thought back to that night, he couldn't help but lament that fate played a huge joke on him. From that night onwards, his fate took a complete turn. The next day, Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting cross-legged and meditating, fell asleep at some point. In his dream, he was intimate with a certain someone who was bathing in the forbidden area. He probably heard the story of Shi Xiaoyan's jealousy, and dreamed of it at night. Otherwise, how could the fairy sister he hadn't dreamed of for a long time appear again? When he woke up with a yawn, the sun was already high in the sky. Wiping away the saliva at the corner of his mouth, Shi Xiaoyan's dirty face couldn't hide the anxiety in front of him. Looking at the other 2 people in the cave, Yu Qianqiu smiled in satisfaction. He would never mistreat those who listened to him. "Martial uncle, you're awake. It's almost noon. Let's hurry." In fact, Shi Xiaotian had wanted to leave long ago. If it wasn't for the relationship between Yu Qianqiu and Gao Tufu, he wouldn't have seen him now. Looking at the two sets of mining tools in front of him, Yu Qianqiu grunted and walked out empty-handed. Shi Xiaotian picked up the two baskets and followed. Although Yu Qianqiu didn't say anything, he nodded in his heart. If Shi Xiaotian didn't even know how to look at things, then he wouldn't be worth his help. The area around the spirit stone mine had long since become empty. Apart from some guards, only a few people could be seen at the entrance of the mine. Junior brother you really made me wait. Gao Shiping, who was at the entrance, laughed when he saw the two people walking over. Yu Qianqiu also waved his hand, walked over, and said with a smile, I don't dare to trouble senior brother. It's just that I drank too much yesterday, and I'm a little tired, so I overslept. This is... Gao Shiping looked at Shi Xiaotian, who was behind him, and asked in confusion. Yu Qianqiu sighed, there's strength in numbers. I've specially found someone to help me. I believe we'll be more confident in completing the task. Ha! I believe in junior brother's ability, and you definitely won't disappoint me. Perhaps only Yu Qianqiu could understand the deeper meaning behind Gao Shiping's words. Gao Shiping then took out something wrapped in a banana leaf and said, Junior brother, you'll probably be in there for another 3 days. This is some food. Junior brother, bring it in to eat. Smelling the aroma of meat, Yu Qianqiu accepted it with thanks. The other supervisor's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Since when did Butcher Gao become so meticulous? Some even suspected that the two of them had homosexual fetishes. The other supervisors also addressed them as Martial Uncle Yu affectionately. After inspecting the two late miners, they let them into the cave. Even Shi Xiaotian benefited a lot from following behind him, and the cold and emotionless Butcher Gao actually nodded and smiled at him. This was really something that only happened once in 1,000 years. Yu Qianqiu slowly walked towards the deepest part of the mine. Shi Xiaotian followed behind him, wishing he could give him a kick. Half of the day had already passed, and he was still so calm. Yu Qianqiu walked all the way to the entrance of the cave that they dug yesterday. He smiled and said, You didn't eat anything this morning, right? It's all my fault for oversleeping. Come, eat something first. You'll have the strength to work when you're full. As he spoke, he opened the banana leaf and revealed a big pile of fragrant, golden-yellow barbecued meat. He tore off half of it and handed it to Shi Xiaotian. Yu Qianqiu took a bite. The taste was really not bad. He was starting to like Gao Shiping, who was willing to work hard after receiving money. He was not like some people in his previous life who did not do anything after receiving money. He hated those people the most. Just as he was enjoying his meal, he suddenly heard someone crying. He saw Shi Xiaotian holding the large piece of barbecued meat and crying. Yu Qianqiu was taken aback. He asked curiously, Why are you crying? Martial uncle, little Tian has not eaten meat for a long time. Little Tian is homesick. Shi Xiaotian wiped his tears and sobbed. What a child. Yu Qianqiu swallowed the meat in his mouth and said, Damn. I was wondering what you were doing. You're crying like a girl. Hurry up and eat. We'll work after eating. Therefore, the two of them squatted in the deepest part of the mine, hugging the barbecued meat and gnawing on it. The sound of chewing echoed. After eating, Shi Xiaotian patted his stomach happily. Yu Qianqiu asked him to take his tools and brought him into the cave that he had dug. When Shi Xiaotian saw the exposed spirit stones all around the cave walls, his eyes immediately widened in disbelief. It was obvious that someone had dug this cave before, but why were the spirit stones right in front of him left untouched? Of course, he did not know that these were leftovers from Yu Qianqiu's digging. He was too lazy to pick them up. Yu Qianqiu pointed deep into the cave and said, I found this. There are more in there, just like here, there are exposed spirit stones. Just a few of them will be enough for us to finish our mission for 3 days. Little Tian, I asked you to dig enough for 2 people for 3 days. Will you do it? Shi Xiaotian nodded excitedly and said, Don't worry, Martial Uncle. You can rest at the side and leave it to me. It won't take much effort to dig these spirit stones. Damn it. Do you think I brought you here to slack off? Yu Qianqiu was in a bad mood after being misunderstood. The muscles on his face twitched as he explained, I didn't leave this place to you to rest. I'm going to look for a better vein of ore. We can't just ignore what happened today and ignore the future. Hearing that Yu Qianqiu was going to find a better mine, Shi Xiaotian immediately patted his chest and said, Don't worry, Martial Uncle. Leave this place to me. Why did it sound like he was comforting someone who was about to die? Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said, Don't go out for the next 3 days. Don't worry and dig here. I'll bring you something to eat. Remember to dig it clean. Don't waste the exposed spirit stones. After Shi Xiaotian agreed, he was too lazy to say anything else. He turned around and went to find a good place to dig for spirit stones. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.